Dear young married couple, we've actually been listening to you, and some of you have reached out and asked for listening to an elderly or an experienced couple talk about sex in the later years.
So we found the perfect couple to talk about this. Dr. Cliff and Joyce Penner are an incredible dynamic duo. They have been married for 60 years. And they talk about sex. That's what they do. He is a clinical psychologist. She is a clinical nurse specialist. And so together they bring both the psychological and medical. He also has a degree in theology from Fuller. So they bring that into the picture as well.
Yeah, they've written 11 books, and they've actually been working with couples for, I believe it was 48 years. So that's an incredibly long time, and long enough to really start to see patterns and movements and stuff that people struggle with.
So in this episode, they get really practical to help you through these stages of your sex life. And they do share a little bit about what sex is like at 80 years old. So you're in for a treat. Listen to this one, get really informed, and pull up some notes, pull up a notebook, take some notes, and share this episode with your spouse. It's something for you guys to listen to together, and definitely grab the resources. Welcome, Dr. Cliff and Joyce Penner, to the podcast. Thanks so much for being on with us today.
Well, thank you for having us. We're thrilled to be here.
Yes, it's special for us because the first marriage training that we went to as a couple years ago was a training by you guys. And then
really?
The next day was a seminar after the training. So it's really special that you're on our podcast.
I still have my
That's
workbook
fun.
from that.
Oh, really?
I sure do. I should have went and found it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But even then, it was very helpful for us just to open the conversation that seems so difficult for so many couples, especially in Christianity when you haven't really had introduction to talking about this kind of stuff.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. That's one of our main goals always, is to just open up the flow of conversation for people so that we can expect them to just learn and communicate together, which ultimately makes a major difference.
Yep, for sure. Well, for those who are listening on the podcast and they aren't watching, they may not realize that we have a couple on our podcast right now that probably in all the years we've been podcasting has the most years of experience.
Definitely.
And age. So we want to find out about your story. We don't ask everyone their story, but it's particularly interesting when someone like you has been talking about sex for so long in Christian circles. So share with us.
And so well respected.
And so well respected, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Share with
Thank
us
you.
how old you are and how you got started with all of this, however many years ago.
Well, both of us are turning 82 this year.
Woo woo!
We have
That's
been
amazing.
And celebrating our 60th wedding anniversary in
my
August.
goodness, that's so cool.
So, and never did, when we got married, did we think we would be doing this for our life work. But I was actually a nursing professor, and Cliff was in private practice as a clinical psychologist. When he was asked to teach a group of moms about talking to your kids about sex. And we had 2 kids at that point. We have 3 actually, but that third one hadn't arrived yet. And he thought, well, this is something I should know about. So he gave the
So I
talk.
prepared a 45-minute talk on Talk to Your Kids about sex.
Nice.
And afterwards, somebody asked whether I would come and teach a group of 60 women a 10-week course on sexual adjustment in marriage. And I
Okay.
said,
2 hours a week, right?
Yeah.
Wednesday night from 7 to 9 or something.
and I said, well, I said everything I knew in that little talk. And they said, no, we think you'd be good. So because it was 60 women and because Joyce was the professor, I prevailed upon her. And so she joined me, and we taught that first course in the spring of 1975.
Wow.
And
Wow.
So we've been doing this 48 years now, and we're
My
definitely the longest.
goodness.
But each step of the
Amazing.
way, we never pursued it. We were always invited. So it really feels like God was calling us to this. And we always say God has had a sense of humor when he called us, as having been raised as Mennonites, very conservative, and the
Wow.
word sex was not even used. In fact, Cliff's mom said, always
she would never say the S word. She would only say what you do.
doing what you do.
There's a lot of things that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Wow.
that was as close as we got to the subject in our families growing up. But
Wow.
so then what happened was that because Word Books wanted a book on sex too, because some of the other publishers had published one. So they asked us to write The Gift of Sex, and that came out in 81.
Wow.
And so now we're talking, that's 42 years old. Interestingly enough, it is still our bestseller of all of our 11 books.
Oh yeah. I
That
can
one-
see why. Like
This
that
is just
one,
a basic, yeah.
it's incredible. We've been recommending The Gift of Sex for over a decade, and it has been used for so many couples in our practice alone. And I know they've recommended it to so many people, and it's also impacted our marriage. So thank you
That's
for
good.
writing that book.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
So we want to dig into how you got from a Mennonite upbringing, never using the S word, all the way to now you're comfortable with it. I mean, I know you said you were invited by people to speak.
Right, and coming from that background, I mean, was it always easy talking about sex with each other, or
Well,
how
it's
this began?
interesting. Yes. What happened is during my last semester in my School of Nursing, I was in School of Nursing at St. Paul, Minnesota, and Cliff was in Bethel College there. We were engaged, and the school decided, so many of us in the class, these small classes, were engaged to be married that summer. So they hired a Christian female psychologist to give a prep to marriage class, which we took the whole quarter or semester. I don't remember, but anyway, and it was so amazing. That was 1963.
Wow.
And she gave a very positive, informed basis for sexual adjustment in marriage. And we were so excited. It was like we were an empty slate, rather than getting false information.
We hadn't gotten any information.
In some ways, that was better, because if we, like so many women we're dealing with today, shut down on their passion to control their actions. And then they get married and they're so disappointed because the passion doesn't return that easily when they shut it down to control their actions. And we hadn't gotten anything like that. And she was giving, so I took notes like crazy. And then we met in the evening and I shared those notes. And so we learned right away to talk about sex. So it never was hard for us. We went from nothing to this open, healthy approach. And that's why we wrote, The Gift of Sex we were asked to write. And then later we wrote Getting Your Sex Life Off to a Great Start for engaged and newly married couples, to help them have that same preparation that we got.
So good.
Wow. I mean, so now that, so fast forwarding, you guys have a good starting place, and you enter in your marriage probably with a very biblical view and mindset around sexuality. But then you probably start hearing all these stories from people that don't have this great experience. What are some of the typical, and now you have 40 years of a track record of watching these things happen over and over. What are some of the patterns in Christian circles? Because our audience is mainly Christian, but what would be the main patterns and things that you see over and over and over with
One
Christians?
One of the things that stands out frequently is the idea that it's the woman's job to keep the man happy and satisfied, so that sex isn't for her, it's for him, and it's her job to see to it that he gets it and he's happy on a regular basis. And then everything will be okay, which is a lie, but that's what's taught.
And then it's, if he gets into porn, which is such a difficulty today, then she must be doing something wrong that he has to go to porn, and she gets blamed for it, which is really not the case.
How does that
Usually,
get perpetuated in Christian circles?
yeah, it is.
That
And
Well,
lie.
is she saying how does
Oh.
that get perpetuated? Um, well,
well, I think it starts actually in dating where if the girl gets pregnant, if they've gone too far, that somehow she didn't set the limits. And so and one thing I've been dealing with frequently lately is women who are newly married and they had so much passion that it scared them. They didn't think they could, so they really prayed to not have their passion or shut it down to control their actions and just stopped all physical contact. And then they get married and they're thinking it's just going to be great. And you can't go from nothing to consummating your marriage on the wedding night and having that passion, because there are all kinds of issues that you experience with that first time. And if you shut down on the passion, then it's just the physical part. And sometimes that isn't so great.
and so what we try to teach at that point is that we don't encourage people to shut down on their passion, but to make very clear choices about their behaviors, not trying to control how turned on they get, but know that if you're going to sleep together or take showers together or go on a 1 week road trip together or whatever, that's going to set you up for being together sexually. It's the most natural thing.
So control the external circumstances rather than shutting down the internal.
That's good advice for premaritals. Like enjoy, be passionate. Don't control how passionate or even turned on you get, but control those external behaviors and contexts.
So for the married couple that is experiencing maybe that just that waning of passion, how would you coach them? And in a lot of your book, I think you have chapters in your book dedicated to this, but what are some of the ways that you help bring back that passion to couples that have had maybe just a decline in passion?
Yes, or actually more that it's shut down completely. And they thought when they went to their hotel room, they would feel those same feelings that they had shut down. And they don't just turn on with a light switch. So if you've done that and it hasn't turned on and you're feeling all that disappointment, take some time to just restart and realize that it may not have that same feeling that it had when you were making out, when you were dating, and realizing, feeling guilty about it, thinking it was wrong, because now it isn't wrong. So there's an additional factor in the feelings when you're doing it with guilt. Don't try to get the same feelings back that you had there. Rather restart and really focus on the love and the intimacy and the warmth and the good feelings.
The way we talk about it in The Gift of Sex is that we want to focus on the pleasure of the experience rather than on the outcome. It's not about how aroused you're getting or how quickly you're having an orgasm or how many orgasms you have or anything else. It's about just enjoying the pleasure of the experience. And then the climax of that will be an outcome from that pleasure, but the outcome, the climax, the orgasm is not the goal. The goal is the pleasure.
But sometimes the woman has to actually grieve the loss of that because it just was such an expectation, and learn to enjoy at a deeper, more intimate level, not that excited, intense newness feeling of doing something wrong and it's so exciting and all that, because it won't be that way. It's about deeper marital love.
Boy, wouldn't that speak to mature marriages where they're maybe even searching for that crazy high that they had when dating, and they're like, we've been married for 20, 30, 40 years. How do we get this thing back? Like, what would you say to them?
You don't work on getting that back. work on making it the best it can be given where you are in this state of life. And that's certainly true at 81 or 82. You don't, and we have the benefit of having had a good experience. So then it's different. But if you didn't have a good experience and then you're 81 or 82, that's a different thing because your bodies aren't going to function the same. There are adjustments that have to be made, but even for those middle years for couples with kids, and when you've got a house full of children, they're often going to bed once they reach the teenage years after you go to bed. And how do you keep connected during that? And in our newer books,
I think this would be a good time to talk about our formula for intimacy.
Yes, and that's
about it.
Yes, and that's in our newer books, The Married Guy's Guide to Great Sex and Enjoy the Gift of Sexual Pleasure for Women.
What we recommend there is that couples plan a 15-minute a day connection that is not about sex, but rather has these ingredients. First of all, it's a conversation of connection and affirmation that is not about planning your life, not about who's going to pick up the dry cleaning tomorrow,
or resolving your last argument.
Yeah.
It's something positive. And what's important in it, in the research Sex and the Brain research has actually validated this, looking into each other's eyes when you talk, because just like when we are to look into the baby's eyes when we're breastfeeding or giving the baby the bottle, when we have eye-to-eye contact, our brain gives a big surge of oxytocin, which is the bonding intimacy hormone. And that's particularly important for couples where they're trying to reestablish an intimate sex life after porn or a sexual addiction has interrupted that meaningful learning.
Or even if it's just that they haven't been able to resurrect those old, excited, passionate feelings from the past. And so then we start with that face-to-face connection, just a few minutes. And then if there's any kind of possibility of any kind of spiritual connection, and everybody's at a different place in that pilgrimage, but whether that's a prayer, a scripture, a devotional, a thought, anything in that direction, wherever that couple is.
And then the physical, and start the physical with a full front to front body hug. I mean, really get in there. We can't do it right now or we'll disconnect all our.
Let's see it. Come on. I'm just checking.
But, and set the timer the first couple times just to see how.
We talk about a 20-second hug. And the reason we talk about a 20-second hug is that the research has shown when there is a full body hug of 20 seconds, it also raises the oxytocin level in the body. That's measurable. And that's the bonding hormone that connects us.
And that's particularly good for women who may have difficulty with passionate kissing, or may have kind of stopped kissing or only kiss when they want to have sex because they're afraid of getting him aroused, which is no problem if he gets aroused. He doesn't have to do something about it. We always say a man has a response every 80 to 90 minutes while he sleeps and gets an erection, and a woman lubricates vaginally every 80 to 90 minutes while we sleep. And he doesn't do something about every response that he gets.
Every 80 to 90 minutes.
Every 80 to 90 minutes, he'd be pretty worn out, and so would she.
That's surprising about her, though. I think a lot of people assume that a man gets aroused more frequently. But it sounds like from the research, a woman gets aroused just as frequently.
Absolutely. And the research now has actually shown that women who say they don't get aroused, many of them actually are when they take the physical signs. It's just that a man's response is so much more obvious, whereas a woman's is so internal that she may not even notice it. So when they're actually measured, she may be getting aroused, but not feeling aroused.
So we got off the eye-to-eye contact, the conversation, a spiritual connection, a full body hug, and then a passionate kiss. And it's in the passionate kissing that we ignite the excited hormones the dopamine.
Yes.
That newness, that excited when we feel a little guilt with it, even a little bit of that can still come back at this age. Just a spark there. So enjoying
good.
then the passionate kiss. And for either men or women who have difficulty with passionate kissing, maybe something happened to them in growing up where kissing was a violation. And so, or they were taught not to have those feelings. So start with just lip to lip and kind of linger, and then include more of the mouth and take it and let the person who is hesitant lead. So you're not being kissed, but you're kissing the other person, especially if there's
initiative.
been sexual violation.
So
with
that's
kissing.
what happens during that 15 minutes. And that's not for the purpose of having a sexual experience. That's for the purpose of keeping the intimacy connected with one another.
That.
Yes.
It sounds really similar to the first couple stages of sensate therapy, you know, where you have those 15 or 20
Right.
to 45-minute sessions of
Yes.
safe touching, caressing, kissing, but without intercourse involved.
Yes.
Would you say a really essential element of this 15 minutes is that safe touch? Like, this is not for us to go hit the bed as soon as we're done.
Yes, because many women, particularly, sometimes it's the opposite, but mostly in our society, it's the women. If she's, doing something and he comes up and wants to kiss her, in her mind, she'll go through, let's see, do I want to have sex tonight or not? And if she isn't sure, then she gives the cheek rather than her lips. And so what
happens over time is then the couple is kissing less and less, and the only time they kiss is perhaps during a sexual experience or leading up to one.
Yeah.
And that really is sad, because kissing is what keeps us alive and ignited and passionate. So kissing, even if it's not about and this is why we created the formula for intimacy and make very clear that it's not an indication of wanting sex. It's just an indication of enjoying each other.
Now, there are some cultures where it is not so common to experience the activity of kissing. And so if you're in that kind of a culture, it's going to take a little bit more deliberate and intentional work
And
to help
slowly.
you get to that place. So we say a 30-second passionate kiss, but you may need to start with a 5-second passionate kiss
Sure.
and work your way up. Even if you just increase 5 seconds per time or 1 second per time, in 30 days, you'll get there.
There you go.
But that's a really, really great question, or a little assessment for people to go through in their minds to say, how often do my wife and I, even with all the busyness or the kids or whatever it is, how much do we kiss?
Yes.
And if it's twice a week, that's something to be worked on.
Yes. Or if it's just a goodbye peck coming and going to work, that's also. And what's nice about this formula for intimacy, you can do that with the kids around. You don't have to have the kids out of the house. That's great for them to see that you're kissing and that you're
Amen.
and that you're saying loving things to each other, and that you're praying or reading scripture. All those things are great model for our children.
We believe that.
So kind of jumping off of so they're establishing intimacy. They're doing this 15-minute. They're becoming more sensual for sure and more intimate. How would you suggest couples to kind of leap or springboard off of this base into more sexual connection as well?
Well, then the formula for intimacy, in addition to this 15 minutes a day, does encourage you to plan one time per week when the kids aren't around. And
Wait, hold on. Plan.
Yes.
That's not organic.
Yes.
That's right. And we should just pause there a moment, because many people
That's good
say,
you said that. Yes, you've heard us say that.
people will often say, well, we just want it to be spontaneous. And we'll ask them the Dr. Phil question. So how's that working out for you?
Not working.
And it's usually the ones who haven't had sex in a year or two that'll say, oh, but that would be so planned. We want it to be spontaneous. We say, yeah, it's not working so well.
Yeah, reassess that.
Yeah. So what we're encouraging there is that just like we plan every other significant event in our life, and it's kind of a discipline, this is the same kind of thing. And we often compare it to the idea of exercising. People who exercise on a regular basis, once a week or 5 times a week or whatever, don't wake up saying, I can hardly wait till we can exercise.
Some maybe do.
Yeah. But most of the time, it's I need to, or
Right.
This is what I
this
do.
is my discipline. This is what we do. And then once they get into it, they get the feel for it.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true with connecting sexually. Very often, you may not even feel it when you start,
Sure.
but as you get into it, the feelings get stirred up, and then you're glad you did.
And that is when you can use our book, The Gift of Sex, or Restoring the Pleasure, that has the sensate focus exercises in it. If you, it's so that you do more than just have a sexual experience. You really take time in that set aside time to pleasure each other, to enjoy each other's bodies, and let that build as it will. And if it doesn't, it's fine, but at least you've had that time together.
So good. You guys have made reference a couple times to the fact that, you are older, you have all of these years of good experiences in your sex life. Are you open to talking? People want to know, are you still having sex at 82 after being married for 60 years?
Well, not as frequently as we used to, but the answer is yes.
That's awesome.
There are 2 things that have happened. One is, as a man ages, his testosterone drops off at a rate of about 1% per year. So
from starting at
around age 25, we reach our peak. And then every year, on average, every man is a little different, but if we're just taking averages, on average, it goes down 1% per year. So at 75, we only have 50% of the testosterone we did at 25.
Okay.
And testosterone is what drives us sexually. And then for the woman, there's all the changes of menopause.
Yes, and the estrogen and progesterone decrease, and different symptoms happen with vaginal fragility and all that. So, and then the other thing we want to say is not everyone our age is able to function sexually. And when we think of sexual intercourse. So, but you can still be sexual and physical with each other in intimate ways and in pleasuring ways and enjoying each other, even if it isn't possible physically for different illness reasons, because not everyone is physically able when they're this age.
So one of the ways we talk about it is that there are kind of stages of our sexual activity. When we're newly married, before the first kids come, if everything's working, that's usually more frequent and easy. Then when the first child comes along, all the statistics show that the sexual frequency drops about 50% when the first child comes along.
For how long?
Well, it depends on when the next child comes.
It may be continuous for a while.
If you're the Dugars and you're having 18, well, that's
19 and counting, I guess.
Yeah, you could grieve that loss.
Yeah. So, and then once you have if you have 2 or 3 kids, whatever it is, that obviously is a very draining physical experience, and they're 1, 3, and 5, and up at different times of the night, and all that stuff. So that cuts it back. Then there's a little lull between when they get out of the toddlerhood stage until they become adolescents. And then, as Joyce was saying earlier, once we have adolescents, then
it gets harder.
Then they're up all hours of the night, and
And if they took the car, then you can't really relax and know they're safe. So you're
Then you
worried.
got stress.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And then once the kids are out of the house, if everything is going well, that's fine. But then there's all the physical stuff that comes along, whether it's breast cancer or a broken bone or
Hip
heart troubles
replacement.
or a hip replacement or all the things that happen
Mhm.
Yeah.
at
Or
that
aging.
stage. And then you hit menopause and all that. So what we really push is not that you have a perfect sexual life that is the same throughout all the decades, but rather that you make adjustments in the stage that you're in to make it the best it can possibly be, given
So good.
what's going on for us right now.
So I think just remembering that, making it the best it can be given your reality, your life situation.
Yes.
And that includes it being mutual and healing from past hurts that might be in there, and just focusing on intimacy and connection and building that kind of unity, becoming one in the biblical sense, not just the physical.
Now, one of the things that we want to be sure to emphasize is we find it very beneficial for couples who are struggling with various issues to read out loud together.
Oh, yes. Good
So,
to
for
mention that.
example, take our book, The Married Guy's Guide to Great Sex, or the one for women enjoying, or even The Gift of Sex, too. Yeah, those two right there.
And maybe even taking turns between them. And not so much to read to get through it, but the reading out loud is so important, because when we have thoughts or patterns that are affecting our body that spin around, like being worried that the man won't get an erection, or the woman worrying about whether she's going to get turned on, or whatever it is that's spinning around it's in the right hemisphere of our brain. And when we verbalize it, and that's why reading out loud is so important, and then talking about what you're reading, it has to go across the midline into the left hemisphere, the verbal center of our brain, which has less control over our body responses. So that's why the reading out loud is so important, and not task oriented to, oh, we didn't finish this chapter, but rather maybe you read 3 sentences and you get into a great discussion, and that's, then there's other sections that you might just read it through and it doesn't really relate to you that much, but it's helpful. And so that's the thing we highly recommend to all couples.
Such good
what
homework.
a fantastic like intervention for people that do have the racing thoughts and worries around talking about sex. Like, even if they have nothing to say, or they think they don't have anything to say, they could still pull out a book or your book and read, hey, let's read this out loud, and then stimulate the conversations from there.
Yes.
Well, and it helps the spouse gain perspective of what their spouse is going through. I'm working with a couple right now where, there's been a lot of trauma, and he has no idea what that's like for her. So they're reading through a book on trauma, and now it's stimulating conversation. He's peering into her world, and it works beautifully.
Good. Yeah. Yes. And that can be helpful even when there isn't a problem, just for enhancement. When you're wanting something new, it'll help give a little more perspective and bring you closer together.
Well, and the other thing is, often couples aren't that familiar or confident in even the use of, they don't know the difference between a uterus and a vagina, and so they don't know the right words to use even.
And she might not even know, let's say she's having pain.
Yeah.
She might not even know what's causing or where the pain is.
Right.
So they just keep having sex with pain. Well, pain perpetuates more pain. So if there's pain, you've got to get help. And today, pelvic floor physical therapists are the best resource for women with pain, or
Joyce,
for men
talk
with pain.
about that. People have no idea that there are actual medical resources out there for sexual pain and how common it is. Can you share more?
Yes. And pain is so common. And many times women either don't share it, or they think.
Well, and often the men say it's all in her head.
Or
But-
she's just making an excuse.
But
Now,
the
if
fact
they
is,
don't have a good relationship,
Yeah.
if they do, it's not. Yeah.
but what we have found in 48 years of doing this, that we have never come across a situation where the pain was in the woman's head. It was always in her vagina.
We always say it's in her vagina.
And it's real and it needs to be taken
Yeah.
seriously.
Yes.
But
Yes.
if you're in an area and you're looking, just go type in Google pelvic floor physical therapist, and there are different websites. And if you can't find one, you can always contact us, or maybe you guys too. And I have different websites that you can go to find a pelvic floor physical
Great.
therapist in your area.
But there are various kinds of reasons why a woman may be experiencing pain, and it always needs to be taken seriously, and it always needs to be understood as something that can be resolved.
Yep.
Over the years, we've worked with many marriages that were called unconsummated marriages. They'd never been able to have intercourse.
Yep.
And in every instance where people were willing to stick with the process, that's the only place where we would claim 100% success.
And it's
Wow.
very measurable. You know whether you have or you haven't.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting because so many people are familiar with erectile dysfunction,
Right.
but so few people know about dyspareunia or vaginismus, and it's more common than erectile
Yes.
dysfunction.
Yes.
Mhm.
And
So-
it's treatable.
Yes.
Yeah, very, very treatable.
Right.
And so no one should think, well, this is just my lot in life. I got stuck with a hurting vagina. You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one thing we have to say, many women feel like, here teenagers can do it in the back of a car. Why on earth? They feel badly about themselves
Right.
that
Yeah.
this is their fault or something wrong with them. And
Yeah.
why do I have to do this work to have something that should be natural?
Right.
And there are many reasons. Sometimes it's just some kind of a fall that happened. Sometimes it is past sexual abuse.
A tissue that's just not in the right place that needs to
Right,
be adjusted.
right.
There's so many
Mhm.
reasons.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes it seems like a lot of women distance themselves from the idea of pleasure.
Mhm. Yes.
Right.
Well, and particularly, they're not going to be experiencing pleasure if it's painful. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
I always say, who chooses to go to the dentist? I just looking forward to going to the dentist.
yeah, my two,
And if that's how you're viewing the marriage bed, like,
Yeah.
you don't
And
want to
if
go
it
to that.
hurts like that, why would you want that?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Not supposed to want pain.
Yeah.
Wow. This has been such a fun, interesting conversation. And
Yes.
we just want to, thank you too for all of the resources. Where could
Yes.
people find your books if they want to find, a book to work on their marriage?
Right. Well, Amazon has them, but if they want to get them directly from us, and want other resources from us, they can go to our website, which is passionatecommitment.com.
passionatecommitment.com. And in there, we've got a bunch of frequently asked questions.
And
And
we should just say for fun, commitment has 2 M's and 1 T. People
We'll put
often
it-
spell it.
We'll put it in the show notes so that you don't even have to be good at
You
spelling.
can just click the
You can
link.
just-
That's
this
awesome.
is fabulous. Well, this is going to be a fun question for you guys. We ask all of our interviewees this question, and I think it'll be fun for us to hear your answer since you were the first marriage seminar we attended, and also you're the oldest guests on our podcast. So go back to your first couple years of marriage. What advice do you wish you would have received? And then fill in the blank, dear young married couple.
Well, dear young married couple, we would say we got what we wished every couple would get, and that we were unusual in getting that.
so, dear young married couple, educate yourself as you're getting into your sexual life together rather than doing what comes naturally. This idea that if we just do what comes naturally, it'll all work out wonderfully. And that's just not true. So that may be true for 10% of people, but
the more we talk about it, and the other thing we find in couples who are trying to keep themselves pure is they think talking about it will make them do it. And if you can't talk about it without being afraid you're going to do it, talk about it in the middle of your parents' living room.
There you go.
You won't do it.
And a park bench, in the park somewhere, or somewhere where you can't do it, but you can talk about it, because it is so important to read about it, talk about it, share your expectations. And that's what getting your sex life off to a great start is so helpful for. Read it out loud together, get to know yourself, get to know each other. Really.
But the simple answer is educate yourself, because this is a lifelong process of learning and growing.
Yep.
So good. So good.
Excellent.
Man, we're so thankful for the Penners.
Yes, we are.
Yeah,
Thank you
I'm
for being practical too. That's
Yeah,
so
I'm curious.
helpful.
Where did you attend a seminar that we did?
It was in East Bay,
Yeah.
California. So I
Oh,
think
Chico?
near
In Danville?
Hayward.
Danville?
Probably
Yes.
Danville. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember that one. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you were there. Wonderful.
We were.
And
That
I'm
was
Yes.
glad you're doing this and making a difference in the world, because when we started, there weren't these kind of podcasts, of course, and
Right.
definitely not about sex. So we're glad you're doing this.
That's
Aw.
wonderful.
well,
Thanks
it's,
for,
we're
thanks for
thank-
having us. We really appreciate it.
All right. So this is great, but we're a busy couple. So when and where do we find time and space to have sex? We got you covered.
Yes, we get it. Go down here, click this video, and it will help you work together to find time and space to work on these things.